Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Charlo had this to say to Canelo. He says, I'll be ready in September. Let's make the fight happen. Fuck the money, fuck the fame, and fuck the networks. Charlo said in an Instagram post, I'll lose my title and go to 168 to make the fight happen now. We can fight in the fall. I don't think he has anything on his resume. Whatever makes Canelo happy, says Charlo. When asked if he'd entertain fighting Alvarez at 164-pound catchweight, we could fight for the 160-pound WBC franchise championship. We haven't seen that in history before. Just get in the ring with Charlo and have the fans shut up. In September, I'll be ready then. I'm fighting June 19th. I'll be ready in September. Whatever they want. They're going to try and put me in a situation where it's not fair for me, and that's why I'm prepared to be the most comfortable in the most uncomfortable position. And if that takes me fighting Montiel, that's what I'm going to do. I'm here to win. I'm here to take over the world. In boxing, it's not that hard to make a fight. They make fights every day. Eddie Reynoso, Canelo's trainer, said, yes, Canelo versus Charlo is a good fight. Charlo has a lot of qualities. He's spectacular, tall for the division, strong, and has good boxing skills. Sooner or later, those fights have to happen. We just have to stay in the gym and keep working. Try to resolve the problems we have and move forward with Canelo's career. Charlo saying he would KO Canelo if they fought. Before fighting in the ring, a lot of things are said. But inside the ring, it's a different story. Charlo would surely punt the waiting game for Alvarez if they could agree on a desired weight between 160 and 168 pounds. The same can't be said for everyone else not named Canelo. If they want to see me, they have to come to 160, Charlo told the rest of the competition. I'm at 160 right now. I'm making it real smooth. We're campaigning at 160 pounds, and so is Demetrius Andrade. Demetrius Andrade, who's a world champion at this weight, the same as Charlo, a two-division champion, the same as Charlo, who can't seem to get Charlo's attention. This recent call-out from Charlo and his supposed willingness to face Canelo Alvarez in September, it's a redundancy.
Stupid.
It's a redundancy because we know that Canelo Alvarez is in the process of unifying the super middleweight division. It's a redundancy because, per reports, Charlo was already offered this fight and somebody on his side turned it down. I'm not going to ignore that. I'm not going to sweep it under the rug. I'm not going to cast that bit of news aside. Why should I?
What?
Why wouldn't it be relevant that, according to Oscar De La Hoya, Charlo was offered this fight and somebody on his side turned it down? Why wouldn't that be relevant here today when Charlo is still using Canelo Alvarez's name to have articles written about him? Why wouldn't it be relevant that Jermal's own brother, Jermell, in the midst of what was their spat last year, their little tiff, he let that cat out of that proverbial bag, echoed those sentiments?
I think these are all relevant factors in the conversation.
I don't know that Charlo really wants this fight.
I've been saying that.
I don't know that a lot of these guys want this fight. I'm not convinced that Caleb really wants it so much as he just wants to get paid to show up, that if he has to show up, he wants an arm and a leg to do so. I think something very similar applies to Jermal. I mean, if these guys really were in the business of fighting the best and wanting to fight the best, well, their resumes wouldn't be as thin as they are. If your whole deal was establishing yourself as the best in show, the best fighter at or around your weight, you wouldn't skirt around fights like a Demetrius Andrade fight, now would you?
How many years has that fight been on the table for Jermal?
I know it gets repetitive. I know that it might start to sound like a broken record. But if these guys really were in the business of establishing themselves as the best in show, they wouldn't wait idly by, sitting on their hands, fighting soft competition until someone like Canelo Alvarez rolls around, because by the time he does, you're indistinguishable from anyone else. This is not me saying that Canelo should not fight Charlo, or Canelo should not fight Caleb Plant, or he should not fight Demetrius Andrade. This is me saying that any one of these guys is just as good as any one of these guys. They're all indistinguishable from each other. So if he ends up with Caleb in September as opposed to Jermal, that's fine by me. If he doesn't fight either of them and he ends up fighting Demetrius Andrade, the same applies.
Because they're all the same.
They all got thin resumes. They're all indistinguishable from each other. What's supposed to make one option better than another? Some jackass's anecdotes?
If I had to make a list of the top 5 guys I'd want to see him face, he's fighting like the 4th or 5th guy on the list. Good for him. I'm happy with the fight, but he's not fighting Beterbiev, Bivol, a Charlo brother. I'll take either one, but let's say Jermal, right? Triple G in a rubber match. What about his opposition now? And I understand these are belt holders at super middleweight, But are any of these guys one of the top, say, 3 guys you'd like to see him fight?
I mean, the fights I want to see most are Jermall Charlo and David Benavidez. I think those 2 guys give Canelo the toughest fights stylistically. They're big guys, even though Charlo's at 160 right now. But look, Max, boxing and the industry, they insist on this nonsense with the titles, so you can't blame Canelo for trying to grab all of them.
Are you paying attention to what's happening here? You paying attention to what Max is doing? Max is actually questioning the quality of Canelo Alvarez's opposition as if someone else is taking on as many unbeaten world champions as he is right now. It's one of those situations where the slack-jawed gawkers in what is this spectator sport want to expect the most from those who are already doing the most. They expect the most from those who are doing the most, and
Those doing the least.
expect next to nothing of those who are doing the least. Those like Jermall Charlo, who's set to be in action very soon against not a Demetrius Andrade, not a Ryota Murata, or a Gennady Golovkin, but a Juan Montiel.
That's okay.
Why don't we see Max and Mike Kopinger raising a stink about that?
Why is that okay?
I mean, why aren't any of these guys up in arms about that? You're telling me that's what boxing fans want to see? That's a titillating fight? That's a titillating match? Charlo versus Montiel. These are guys who seem dissatisfied with Canelo Alvarez's big win over Billy Joe Saunders. They're dissatisfied with that, and they actively advocate for Jermall Charlo.
Right.
As if Jermall Charlo has done something that Billy Joe Saunders hasn't done. Billy Joe Saunders was a 2-division unbeaten champion the same way that Jermall Charlo is a 2-division unbeaten champion.
It's the same fucking shit.
It's the same fucking shit as Andrade, with the difference being that Billy Joe Saunders actually held a world title in the division that Canelo is currently campaigning in. And they're sliding that. They're actually sliding Canelo Alvarez's campaign to become this division's undisputed champion as if that's something to sneeze at.
If it's so fucking easy, why doesn't Jermall do it?
Not like he's in Canelo Alvarez's division anyway. He's been campaigning as a middleweight for about 2-3 years now. If it's so easy, if that's something to sneeze at, why hasn't Jermall Charlo done it yet? If unifying the super middleweight division were something to sneeze at, why has it stood divided up until this point? If this were easy to do, then why hasn't it been done yet?
Because it's not easy to do.
What, we're gonna act like the situation has changed because it's Canelo and not someone else? We're gonna act like the boxing fans don't ask for this? One guy holding all the belts, unification matches, consolidation of alphabet titles. We're gonna act like this ain't what boxing fans are asking for 99.9% of the time? We're gonna act like this because you're sweet on Jermall Charlo? Because you're sweet on David Benavidez?
Oh, fuck off.
If it were Plant versus Saunders, would they complain? If it were Charlo versus Smith, would they complain?
Well, they don't seem to be complaining about Charlo versus Montiel.
You're not impressed with Canelo versus Saunders. It's real fucking funny how that works. Just in keeping with the theme of news coming out of the super middleweight and middleweight divisions, there's a preliminary report circulating from Paul Andrade, the father of Demetrius Andrade, WBO middleweight champion. He stated that they're in talks to face Chris Eubank Jr.
Not a bad fight.
At least not for Demetrius Andrade. This is an entirely winnable fight. If I'm being honest, I would have picked Demetrius Andrade to beat Chris Eubank Jr. before Chris enlisted the aid of Roy Jones Jr. And now that he has enlisted the aid of Roy Jones Jr., I really don't feel any different. I feel that where Chris is right now, in an experimental stage in his career, trying out a new trainer, trying out a new style, which isn't a finished product yet.
Andrade beats him.
I still think Demetrius beats him. I'm not doubting Roy Jones Jr.'s ability to have an impact on Chris moving forward. I'm just saying that this might be too much too soon for Chris, given that he's experimenting right now. That if this is Chris Eubank Jr.'s next fight, this is a fight that Chris is going to lose. You know that Chris and Roy have got to be thinking about that, you know? They can say whatever they want to say to the interviewers. They can say whatever they want to say when the cameras are rolling. But behind the scenes, they've got to know that this is a very risky fight for Chris Eubank Jr. And given that he's experimenting with a new trainer and a new style and all of that, and it isn't quite yet a finished product, they have to know that now is not the most opportune time to fight Demetrius.
Yeah.
That being said, in spite of these preliminary reports by way of Paul Andrade, Demetrius Andrade's father, I'm not fully convinced this fight happens. For Andrade's sake, I hope it does. I'm just not sure that it will.
I'd sooner believe Chris fights Vincent Farfendugan in his next fight.
Fagan boots.
Fagan boots, okay?
I'd sooner believe that than Chris Eubank Jr. taking the plunge in what would be his very next fight, only his second fight under the tutelage of Roy Jones Jr. I'd sooner believe he takes on Fagan boots in his next fight than someone like Demetrius Andrade. I just don't see it. I mean, I wouldn't be mad if it came off. For Demetrius' sake, I wouldn't be mad. You know, I wouldn't be mad if Canelo Alvarez picked him. I'm a firm believer that things with Plant are going to fall apart, and when they do, Canelo Alvarez is going to be in the market for another opponent. Wouldn't be mad if he picked Demetrius in that situation, though it does go back to what I told you before. If he picks Demetrius, or he don't pick Demetrius, if he ends up fighting Caleb, if he ends up fighting David, if he ends up fighting Jamal, it's all the same fucking shit to me. I'm not going to lambast Canelo for picking one of these guys instead of another when they're all fucking sane.
I'm not against Demetrius getting that opportunity.
I just don't think that he is more deserving of that opportunity than someone else. They're all on the same boat.
It's all the same fucking shit.
We all know about Demetrius Andrade and his father confronting Canelo Alvarez post-fight after Canelo Alvarez's big win over Billy Joe Saunders. We all know the attention that confrontation got. That has caused a sentiment to be expressed in some circles that Canelo Alvarez should stop pussyfooting around Andrade and give him a shot. Those people out there who are dissatisfied with Canelo's win over Callum Smith, dissatisfied with Canelo's win over Billy Joe Saunders, and for one reason or another,
They think Demetrius deserves a shot more than they did.
and they think Demetrius is a better fighter than those guys were.
Purely anecdotal.
That sentiment is neither proven nor earned on the part of Demetrius Andrade. Better still, there are those out there that feel this way. Because Demetrius confronted Canelo Alvarez post-fight after the Saunders fight, I find myself wondering if these same sympathizers for Demetrius had this same energy when Demetrius confronted one of the Charlo brothers post-fight.
About 5 years ago.
In December of 2016, post-fight, after Jamal Charlo had knocked out Julian Williams.
They playing Demetrius a violin then the way they're playing him one now?
Because I don't remember it that way. I don't recall this outpouring of sympathy for the plight of little old boo-boo, little Demetrius Andrade. It seems that a good chunk of this wave of sympathy we've been seeing is specific to the Canelo Alvarez situation. I didn't see all this energy expressed when he confronted the Charlo brothers.
People can never keep the same energy.
Like I said, I'm not against him getting the Canelo fight. I just don't see precedence to lambast Canelo, who's doing the most right now, anywhere at or around these weights. I don't see precedence to lambast him if he decides to give that opportunity to someone other than Demetrius Andrade. As far as this Eubank fight goes, I hope that Demetrius gets it.
I hope he does.
I hope that it comes off. I'm just not fully convinced that it will. And finally, per tweet from Michael Benson, Sky's Adam Smith on broadcasting Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Logan Paul on pay-per-view. The trade fans might be saying this is not really boxing, but let's be honest, it's entertainment, it's an exhibition, it's fun, it's gonna be a circus, and we're all in for it. You know that Sky, they didn't pick up the Lomachenko versus Lopez fight. That was one of the most, at least at that time, one of the most highly anticipated fights in the world of boxing. Here today, they haven't picked up Taylor versus Ramirez, the undisputed title fight set to go down at 140 pounds. They haven't picked that up either.
As a pay-per-view or otherwise.
They didn't pick it up. But they have so decided to pick this up. They have so decided to pick up the Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Logan Paul exhibition match. And, I don't know how interested the Brits are in this thing. I don't know how interested the Brits are in paying pay-per-view cover charge for an exhibition match between Floyd and a YouTuber when they were just griping at paying the cover price for Derek Chisora versus Joseph Parker. Weren't happy that they had to pay for that. Some of them over there across the Atlantic Ocean. So how happy are they going to be that Sky picked this up? Are they even interested enough to get into an uproar about it?
How interested do you think they are in seeing Chad Ochocinco?
Versus ex-bare-knuckle boxer Brian Maxwell. How interested do you think they are in seeing that? Do they know Brian Maxwell? Do they know Chad Ochocinco, otherwise known as Chad Johnson? Not a boxer or a bare-knuckle boxer, but an ex-NFL player.
Think that spices up the card for them?
Do you think they know who Chad Ochocinco is? Do you think they'd get up extra early, pay the cover charge, just to watch those two guys fight? Or is the Mayweather versus Logan Paul, is that exhibition match the main selling point to the Brits? Because Sky decided to pick this up, so they must think somebody's interested in it.
Either one of those two fights qualify as high-level boxing matches.
As far as boxing matches go, high-level boxing matches go, in the realm of boxing and actual boxers, you've got the John Pascal versus Badu Jack rematch, the long overdue rematch between those two guys. You think that's a strong enough selling point that this should be billed as a Sky Sports pay-per-view? Do you think the Brits are willing to get up extra early so that they can catch Jarrett Hurd versus Luis Arias? Somebody over there at Sky must think they are, because They decided not to pick up Lomachenko versus Lopez. They decided not to pick up Taylor versus Ramirez. They decided not to pick up those fights, those relevant fights to the world of boxing and boxing fans. They passed on those, but they did decide to pick this up. So they must think somebody over there is interested in it.
Is it Yale?
I guess the silver lining here, if there is one, is that this is yet another arm of revenue for Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Logan Paul, if that means anything to you. This is another market that they're trying to tap into with this wave of novelty acts.
Celebrity boxing matches.
That this time, unlike before, on this side of the Atlantic Ocean, they've managed to get both Al Heyman and Showtime involved, and over there in the United Kingdom, they have managed to get Sky Sports involved. More well-known outlets, more well-known fixtures, I'd say, in the world of boxing than Fanmio. If I'm being honest, before that story, I never even fucking heard of Fanmio. Didn't know what it was. Didn't know where you'd find it. Is it under the couch?
It's in the garage.
I think that between Sky, over there in the United Kingdom, and Showtime here in the United States, those two respective networks, transatlantic networks, can raise more awareness of the event than Fanmio could, though ultimately raising awareness of the event, letting people know that it's going on, does not guarantee their dollars, does not guarantee their interest. You can know that the circus is in town, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going.
Plus, maybe you don't like clowns.
I can't gauge what interest exists or doesn't exist over there in the United Kingdom. You'd have to ask a Brit about that. But I can tell you what we're feeling in the United States. And in the United States, I gotta tell you, nobody's biting their fucking nails over this. This doesn't even have the buzz around it that the Conroy-McGregory fight had.
I'm a little bit embarrassed by it.
I'm a little bit embarrassed for Floyd, if I'm being honest.